What's up, bikers? Welcome to the B1KER Bar Podcast. Here we are, episode 166, and today we have 99 spokes. And if you're like me 2 weeks ago, you might not have heard of them, but they actually have a pretty rad website that they built that lets you decide or actually compare multiple bikes, which I thought is really cool. And they have an up-and-coming social media presence that's been putting out some pretty good content. So one way or another, you know how the YouTube algorithm works. It just pops things in front of you. And next thing you know, here we are, we're chatting. So before that, I want to thank everybody on Patreon. Somebody popped in there this week. That was much appreciated. You guys are honestly what's supporting the channel. It's super grassroots. Just think of it this way. If you give your waitress a 20% tip when she brings your food to the table, usually it's probably more than $5. So you can drop $5 my way, help this channel go, and it does all the good things. Buys camera gear, it puts beer in the fridge. I mean, that's an essential to this thing being successful. But nonetheless, otherwise, you can swing by Instagram or Facebook, give me a follow over there, and that helps keep the stoke high. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, you know what to do on the YouTube. So the likes, the subscribes, those are fun. Anyways, let's go ahead and bring these guys back on, and we'll start talking about some bikes. So we have Scott and we have Josh. So two guests today. How's it going, guys?
Very good. Stoked to be here, Robert.
Right on.
Excellent.
I just screwed it up. There. Do I have the names right?
Yeah, it looks good.
Sweet. Those of you guys listening, it's always a little bit of a shit show here when it's live. So anyways, so you guys started, or I'm not sure who's the in the founding crew here of
That's me. Yeah.
Spokes.
Yeah.
What if you were explaining what 99 spokes is, what is it to you?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Almost 7 years ago now, I was working at a company. I'm a software engineer. Some friends and I, a couple buddies, were looking for something fun to do on the side. We were kicking various projects around, and around that time, I was out on my road bike. I crashed. I bent my derailleur hanger. I needed a replacement. Couldn't figure out what model year it was. I couldn't remember, and I looked online. There was nothing there, so that sort of spawned the idea of, well, let's use technology to build like a bike archive that helps people find replacement parts for their bikes.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's really where it started. We just basically started aggregating all the bike data we could get a hold of. We kind of pivoted away from the replacement parts idea pretty early, because one, that's a really challenging problem to solve with the limited data that's out there, and it would require a lot more resources than we had. And the general interest seemed to be around, people shopping for new bikes, because as someone who's obsessed with bikes, that's kind of, you're always thinking like, what's new and what's interesting and how does that compare to what I have or what I've ridden and whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's that was the inception of 99 Spokes, and that's how it all
was
started.
the idea with the spare parts to be like linking to places to sell them and then making some kind of like commission off of that, or was it like the idea was like ad-based revenue for the website?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think we had a really solid monetization plan at that point.
Yeah.
I think in the early days, this was like, can we build something cool and make enough money to like buy a burrito? And like stretch goal is, can we elaborately launder money away from the family resources through this little side project to buy bike parts?
Yeah.
And then I don't think we truly imagined being where we are today, 7 years ago.
I think
a lot
of people that start things just it doesn't usually start with this like huge idea. I mean, even just like you said, when I started my YouTube channel, I think my monetary goals were, I actually remember saying to one of my friends, if I can buy one bike part by the end of the year, it was worth it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a passion thing, right? Like you're doing it because you love the thing that you're working on, and that's the main motivator. And I think at the end of the, when you're able to focus on the thing you're building, just around, how can I make this useful to me, and the problems that I have, I think it actually helps you build a better product than when you're trying to figure out how to optimize for clicks or, ads or.
So it was just you initially by yourself, or?
No, it was two friends and I, Brian Smith and Jacob Carpenter. We were coworkers, and I think most of the code and the site in the early days was created just during our lunch break at work, and it sort of it evolved into a nights and weekends thing. Over the years, we were just shouting into the void for a long time. I think at least a couple of years, like where most of our traffic is Google organic. So if Google doesn't think we're interesting, then obviously we're not getting any traffic. And so it was like that way for a long time. We started to actually, I think the first real interesting needle mover for us as far as, this is a real thing, was connecting with Canyon Bikes, Canyon USA. Mm-hmm. We'd done our own little make Reddit posts or post in forums like, hey, we did this thing, check out this new feature.
Right.
And one of the the director of marketing at Canyon USA saw our Reddit post and then reached out, and then we connected with Blair, the president of Canyon USA, and they were super excited because they're really interested in using the data that we'd organized. So mm-hmm. when they're looking at their product lineup and how does it compare to what else is on the market and what other people are looking at, that became really interesting to them, and that sort of kind of enlightened us to this other an actual revenue option for this mm-hmm. project that we had. So I think that was the first big moment for us. And then our traffic was just kind of growing slowly, but then when the pandemic hit, I don't know if that was coincidence or we just were around long enough, but our traffic really started to take off at that point.
Yeah, it seemed like everybody that had anything to do with bikes in the pandemic kind of blew up. So yeah, I know even with other creators that are in my space, like we've all seen a kind of a dip since that has kind of come off. A lot of people went from, whatever number of views to a definite percentage more during the COVID thing. So so you said you started out with 3 and now you're having a hard time understanding how you guys got to where you're at. Where are you at?
Sure. Now? Yes. Sorry. Let's see. It was a side project until about a year and a half ago. And then at which point my colleague Brian and I jumped and went full time on 99 Spokes, quit our day jobs. And then at that time shortly after that, we hired another developer to help us with the data work that we're doing. And we have a part-time UI UX person and a part-time, bookkeeper. And then Josh came on, I think in a little bit like July-ish.
End of July.
Yeah. So it was sort of a long burn and a lot of we just saved everything. And then we got to a point where we had enough runway to make a go at it. And here we are.
Yeah. And Josh, so that the people listening kind of get a feel for what you're doing over there. Can you explain to them?
What I'm doing specifically with 99 Spokes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was hired by them. It's kind of an interesting story how we connected. If you want me to
go for it, man.
Yeah, cool.
We're here to chat.
I started running my own YouTube channel about a year and a half ago, and mostly centered around hardtail content. I'm a huge hardtail guy. But my wife was in it a little bit too, and it was kind of a mix between doing review type videos and just kind of road trips and kind of your average COVID mountain biker YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And Bikes Online, are you familiar with bikesonline.com?
Yep. Yeah.
So they actually reached out to us to be presenters for their YouTube platform and Instagram and stuff. And I wasn't quite ready at that time to let go of some of the brand deals that I had worked with. And I was working with a couple companies. RSD was the main one, but also Marin a little bit, spacing. But I wasn't quite ready to kind of let go of that. So all being said is Wendy started working with them as a presenter, and I was working alongside this company, and the head of content over there, his name was Phil, was actually in conversations with 99 Spokes about taking this position. And kind of at last minute, he got a promotion at Bikes Online and decided to stay there. And Scott kind of was like, you know anybody else? And meanwhile, I'd been doing all the kind of script writing and filming and editing for Wendy stuff. So Phil was like, hey, I know this guy, Josh. So at that point, Phil introduced the two of us. And I had used 99 Spokes quite a bit because I've always been a huge bike nerd and love comparing bikes and seeing, difference in geo and different things. And I have a kind of unique taste in geo. So like using 99 Spokes to compare that. So when Phil let me know, like, hey, here's this company, I don't know if you've heard of 99 Spokes. I was like, dude, I've used their screen recordings like in my YouTube videos. So
yeah.
They kind of hired me on mostly to start a YouTube channel, but then also to take over the social media that they already had, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, and run with that. But kind of my background is more on the YouTube and video making side of things than it is social media. So I've been kind of building the airplane as it flies in terms of my social media knowledge.
Yeah. So did you have any like schooling for that stuff beforehand, or it was kind of like just learned it because you were interested in it?
Yeah. So I'm actually, I have a weird schooling background. I taught high school science for 4 years. So I have a master's degree in secondary science education.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I was super into BMX. So like many kids, like making skate videos and BMX videos. So I made my first video edit on Windows Movie Maker in middle school in like 2008 or something like that. And just kind of kept with it, and whatever once in a while have kind of some part-time jobs. So I was doing some video work through like Upwork and Fiverr. And then my wife and I moved onto the road full time and lived out of a van for about 2 years. And during that time, I was working for a few other YouTube channels, just doing freelance editing for them. So I've been editing videos for, like half my life, but never any formal schooling or training. Just started as a kid and never really stopped.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in life that you can be really good at and not have to go to school for. So
yep. And you can go to school for a long time and not use any of it at your work, which I'm an example.
100%. Yeah, I was just gonna say I've been in the IT industry for a long time, and when IT was kind of getting more mainstream, most of the people that would be getting hired for these gigs that were, $100,000 plus, like basically went to high school. like basically high school though, and was like, there was no, I remember when I started going to college, there was the only IT degrees that like IT related degrees that you could get would be computer science, which is all programming, or like a what was it, like business, something business. I forget, but it was also programming, but with like business like degree. Okay. Otherwise, there was no such thing as like administration or network engineering or anything like that. So it's and so like even there's a lot of people like in my that are in their career where I'm at that still are like no degrees, and like today though it's like, you have to have this bachelor's and maybe even a master's and all these certs and all this and that, and it's like, wow, or you could just learn it and go do it.
Exactly.
And I think it's like a very similar thing whenever I got into the YouTube side, was like a lot of us like zero clue how to open up like Adobe Premiere or even, what any of that stuff is. And you kind of learn it on the way. And I think that for some reason, I don't know, schooling definitely like diminishes the fact that like generally it diminishes that idea that people can actually be just as proficient without it. Like back in the day, like let's just say like Abraham Lincoln, like to be a lawyer, you didn't actually have to go to like law school. Right. You could just like learn a lot and be like, I'm a lawyer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
exactly. It's like if you could do the work, then sure. So whether that's being a lawyer, IT, or whatever else, it's like, hey, if you can do the job well, then great. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. So Scott, what was it that made you decide to push or market your website through a social media kind of presence with doing content like YouTube?
Yeah, it's not something that came naturally to me, which is, why we waited 6.5 years probably.
Yeah.
I think, if enough people tell you should do a thing, you finally start to listen to them. And I think, we knew that it was a good idea, but it wasn't something that Brian and I wanted to do ourselves. I think we tried, we dabbled in it. We weren't very good at it. We knew we needed to sort of go all in. And, I think just once we had the budget to do it, then it was a no-brainer. And I think we got really lucky with connecting with Josh. I think, trying to figure out, not being the creator myself, trying to write up that job description and find that right person would be super difficult. And even now knowing what I want and being more opinionated about, what kind of content we need to produce, I think, it was really lucky to connect with Josh. I think Josh, having done his own channel and, has this like living resume of, work, right, that you can just look at, and all I need to see is that. Can you do that for us? Yes. Okay, great. Let's go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was we just needed the resources to pay for it, I think. It's been pretty interesting though. Like we've been working on, 99 Spokes is global. We have a large amount of traffic, but it's distributed across, the globe. And, I live in Bellingham, Washington. So it's super, mountain bike town, right? Everybody rides bikes. And, when I go out and talk to people, almost no one knows what 99 Spokes is. And, really avid cyclists, right? But now that we have a YouTube channel, everyone kind of knows what 99 Spokes is. Or now that we have a social media presence, it's done amazing things, just anecdotally at least, for raising awareness into what we're doing, and within the matter of months, right? It's pretty impressive.
So the idea is just to make content, just bike related content, not necessarily something to do with like actually what your website does.
Yeah, no, I think like we don't, it's not purely for the sake of clicks or likes or subscriptions. I think we try and have, what we're doing tie back in some way to sort of helping you find your next bike or educating you about bikes. But, it isn't like, here's how you use the site, or here's how to do this feature, or, it's not just like documentation. It's more like entertaining content around, the problem that we're trying to help you solve with the site itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely like, in my opinion, like a very ingenious way to market what you're doing. It's definitely, I think it puts you a little bit more on the forefront of the way that a lot of companies may not be like necessarily thinking that way, especially in the bike industry. It seems like the social media aspect of the bike industry companies out there, they're starting to get it. Some of them really do, and some of them really don't. So it's interesting that you guys made that decision, as a young company to go that way and actually make your own content. I mean, you see some other places that are like, one that comes to mind is like Worldwide Cyclery. Like they do a lot of content, and it's good content, and then therefore it gets people to buy stuff from their site. But it's not like every one of them is like, hey, buy this here. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Totally.
So what's the goal, Josh, for the content that you're making?
I think at the end of the day, the goal is to kind of drive people towards the website, and kind of like Scott said earlier, just sort of raise awareness for the fact that the website's there. I touched on a second ago that I think that the problem that the website is solving, or the tool that the website offers riders of being able to compare bikes side by side so easily, is like, is so critical. I think so many riders don't do that. They just kind of walk into their local bike shop or see what a buddy has and be like, sure, it's got that cool like gold fork thing on it. I'll take that one. And have no idea, like, you know, how small, subtle things can like vastly change what a bike is like. And not many people have the opportunity to go and test ride like, you know, 5 different bikes side by side. And I think what 99 Spokes allows you to do is get essentially as close to that as possible. And even like a new tool that they just developed, that's the ride feel calculator that just kind of ranks the bikes and, like, speaking for mountain biking, like the terrain that it can handle, you know, from like basically XC to downhill, and then like kind of like your rider position on the bike, and just helps kind of line that up and help you see where this bike that you're looking at compares to others on the market. And I think for a lot of riders, that's like challenging to wrap their head around. So going back to what you asked, I think just like kind of, for one, directing people back to the website, but then, as Scott alluded to, kind of helping in that same vein of just educating people about like what bikes are out there, what the differences are between them, and then help them make the best decision for what could be the best bike for them.
Yeah, totally. I think that is a good it's a good market for getting in front of people on YouTube as well. Like people that are doing that kind of, like, let's just call it like tutorial based, you know, where it's like, you know, like, hey, this is how your stem works, or, you know what I mean? Like this is how this bike feels. Like those, I always say reviews get views. You know what I mean? Because it's people that are looking for that type of information. And I think especially like what Scott was saying earlier with the influx of a lot of new riders through the COVID kind of situation, there's definitely a lot of people that are looking for that information.
Yeah, and I think too, like a big part is like the rise of, I'm wrapping up doing a review on the Polygon Colossus N7. I don't know if you've heard of that bike yet. It's a $2,000 enduro bike, pretty good spec for the price. And there's so many like Canyon, YT, Polygon. I'm sure I'm thinking of others of like these direct to consumer companies that have really blown up over the last 5 years. Like I think that kind of speaks to it too. Like you can't unless you live in San Clemente, you can't just go and try a YT unless you live in, I don't know where Polygon's at. Like, so I think helping riders be able to like get as close to seeing this stuff out, as close as they can without actually like throwing a leg over the bike and taking it for a ride, I think is helpful. And like you said, I think, sure, it translates to views on YouTube, but for us, the main thing I think is just like creating this tool that helps riders out. And so,
I mean, I went and clicked around the site. Like you said, Scott, I had never really heard of you guys until I think it was actually one of my listeners that sent me a message and was like, hey, check these guys out. And when I went to the site, though, it just, for people that have never been there, you can easily put like 5 bikes right next to each other. So, and 5 bikes that are like not anything to do with each other. So you could say like this Fazzari e-bike and this Canyon XE bike and the Santa Cruz Bronson and a tall boy, and you put them all in a row. And you got the price of them all, you got the specs of them all. So it's like, here's the stems they're all using, here's the cassettes they're all using, here's the wheel set that they're all using. And instead of having like 16 tabs open on your browser and then trying to like scroll around to the different part of the page and be able to make that decision that way, like it's really clear and concise to just look right at it. So you mentioned that tool that you were talking about showing you kind of what the feel of the bike is. I think I saw that on there. What other tools do you guys have that are other than the comparison there?
So we have, let's see. So we try and normalize different aspects of the bike in a way that we can, talk about them next, relative to each other. So I think, the ride feel is one, and that's using things like, a lot of geometry measures to just sort of, in the simplest terms possible, is this bike A and bike B, is this one going to be, a better rough descender or more of a nimble, climber or something like that. So the relative differences there are pretty interesting. We also have like a gearing chart. So maybe more interesting in the road space, but, if you're looking at, say, a gravel bike and, you've got this like 1x12 versus a 2x12, right? And you have really steep hills to climb. We give you a visual representation of, how much lower of a gear does, the 2x bike have compared to the 1x. And you can even add in your own bike's gearing and see. I mean, really all we're doing is converting that to gear inches and putting them next to each other, but it's a simple way to see, the difference there, which can be kind of important. I think the most popular feature we have is, we just call it spec level. And we basically can represent a bike as the sum of all its parts. So, we pull out key things like what's the frame material, what's the rear derailleur, what are all the components, what component level are they, suspension, etc. And then, we have assigned values to all those pieces. And then when you sum them up, and then you can put them in a scatter plot, and you can see, with price as your x-axis. And so you see this scatter plot with the bike you're looking at highlighted. And then if you see a bike to the left and up, then that means it's a bike that costs less money and has a nicer build or has nicer parts, right? And so when you're just in that,
like kind of point you in a direction that you may not even be thinking.
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of people it's like an exploration feature, kind of.
Yeah.
These are the 3 bikes I'm looking at. I'm looking at the spec level chart now and seeing, what are the better value bikes out there? And, it's not, we have some, there's some subjective opinions, and, is how much better is carbon than aluminum than steel, or, whatever. But, there's, it's an algorithm that we've refined over the years and have had lots of input, and, it's by no means the sole decider that you should use for buying your next bike. But it can be helpful to highlight some things that you may not have considered.
So that's actually at the end of the day, you have a lot of really good data then. I mean, I would imagine that you could probably say, like, I know what brands come up on that, like, best price per build kind of the most, right? Is it like in certain tiers though? It's like, oh yeah, well, it's going to be specialized if you're in the like 5,000 to 8,000, but it's going to be Polygon if you're in the 2,000 to 3,000, or is it something like that, or is it actually like just kind of scattered a little more?
Yeah, I mean, the usual suspects are usually there, but which you can probably guess. But there are definitely interesting holes in different brands lineup, or these outliers, like, Specialized may have this super competitive price, status or something like that. Like things pop out like that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Especially with like some interesting prices around, e-mountain bikes, where, you're kind of thinking these guys aren't making any money off of this bike. They're just trying to get into this space right now, because you can do sort of an apples to apples there.
Are you guys crawling the sites like for the data, or is it like how
it's pretty, it's not super sexy, but we've just, well, in the early days, the plan was we're going to use, I don't know if you're familiar with the Wayback Machine, but it's like an online archive of all the that was the early plan, was like, we're going to go back 10 15 years and get all this bike data, and that quickly didn't work, because it's not what especially when you're talking about a site as big as a bike product site, right? Like it doesn't capture all those pages. So yes, we scrape what is publicly available. When we first started, we were able to capture any archive pages that a brand had, but most of them didn't have that. So starting in 2016, we had the 2016 bikes, and then in 2017 we had the 26. Now we have 2 years of bikes, and then like a few years in, we went to Eurobike and sort of widened our perspective on what's out there, and so then we started really focusing on an international focus. And so over the years, our coverage has improved, but we do have a data pipeline that we run at least once a week that goes and scrapes all the brand sites.
So how far back is your historical data then? So from like 2016, or do you have something that's older than that, or 2016
solid North American coverage, and then the the European expansion is sort of what took a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then any site that had an archive, we have those bikes as well, but those don't go back any really further than 2010 or so.
Yeah, I would say, I was even going to say 2016 is probably, even at that point, a lot of bikes, they would take down last year's model and they didn't leave you with anything.
For sure.
Afterwards.
Yeah. I mean,
so it was like, I remember buying a bike in like 2006 and it's like, dude, save everything. Because if you want to look up what bottom bracket you have later, you're screwed. unless you call them and, I don't know, like some of those bike places were good that way. Like I remember back in the day I had a Cannondale and you could call them and be like, what size is this? And they'd tell you. But I don't know. I would imagine it that if I called Santa Cruz like that, they'd probably be like, dude, look online or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they might be one of the better ones, but yes, most of them are. We have actually found that, we've made connections directly with brands, and it seemed reasonable to think that we would start sourcing this data directly, but we found that the bike industry is not great at managing its own data, and the actual consumer-facing site is the best, like most up-to-date, resource of what's available. And it's the thing that the people see and then they report the issues and the people fix, right? Whereas the spreadsheet that's on somebody's laptop is not. So
my assumption would be that, like a lot of companies in today's day and age, that they were not technology companies first. And now that technology has become as prevalent as it is, that they're having to learn how to be. But I mean, even the company I work for, we have software engineers and a lot of them, and they don't really know how to be a software engineer company, and like you go somewhere like Google, they got it like dialed, right? They know how to deal with permissions and whatever, and you get to other companies and it's like, no. So in the bike industry, I can 100% see it's like, we're making bikes, man. We hired somebody to make our website, and that's Joe, and Joe does the things on the website. And if you ask us anything about it, we don't know. Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
The transition is in Bellingham, and I know one of the founders, Kevin, there, and when we were first starting this thing, I met with him and kind of shared what we were doing, and he's like, oh yeah, me and Kyle, that's how we started. They were working at T-Mobile or something, and they started building I can't remember what the name was, but you could actually find it in the Wayback Machine, but it was a online bike archive with scraped bike data, and that's how and then they of course transitioned to something bigger and better, but we all know and love. But
yeah.
So when are you doing that, Scott?
What's that?
When are you doing that? When are we making
when are we a bike brand? No. We have dabbled in physical goods as far as like socks and t-shirts, and I confirm that, like, I'm allergic to them. I don't want to touch physical goods. They're very complicated. I think we shipped a shirt to someone in Canada, which is like 20 minutes from my house, and it costs like $30 or something.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you get into the international stuff, and you never know. I know when I first started selling merch, I had to like limit it to just US, because it was situations like that where it was like, the shirt's $20 and the shipping's $75, and
exactly.
It's like, okay, well, that's not going to make much sense. So totally. So Josh, when you're creating content, do you have like pretty much like they're just giving you like a free rein, or kind of what's the direction like?
Relatively, which has been nice, because I'll say that it's a lot of companies I've worked for have been much more hands-on, which has its pros and cons, but sometimes it feels like you're making content that's designed by committee, and just ends up weird. So the way it usually works is all kind of like collectively, the three of us will come up with the list of, we upload weekly, so the list of what long form videos we want to do, and then I'll outline those, send it over to them to kind of give it the okay, make sure it looks good, and then work on scripting, filming, editing, all that sort of jazz, and then give it back at the end. And for the most part, they're kind of just looking for errors. Like I would say Scott and Brian have been very just kind of hands off stylistically in terms of how I do it. We have conversations about how we want things to look and sound best. But for the most part, they've just kind of been like, hey, we hired you because it seems like you know what you're doing. Keep doing it. So that's been nice. I think that's helped streamline things, and that has helped it to grow relatively fast. I mean, we're at over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube in 2 months. So a big part of that is just the name recognition that 99 Spokes already has. But I think part of it too is just that we're working well as a team, and so it's going well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you guys are putting out refined content as well. I mean, looking at thumbnails alone, it's obviously not, it's clear to me that there's more direction than somebody that's just starting at 2,000 subscribers, because typically you don't normally see a channel that has that smaller number of subscribers with the content that looks as clean as what you guys are putting out. So, I mean, obviously you're going to continue to grow. It's apparent that you guys are doing a good job in the amount of time that you are to hit that many subscribers already. So, and that stuff just steamrolls as it goes as well. So, yeah. So I would imagine, Scott, with the connection that you guys have to other industry companies as it is right now, that you guys are able to get like demo bikes and stuff like that for Josh to be able to work on pretty easily, or do you have some kind of
it's not as easy as we have a surplus of $1,000 e-bikes from China at our disposal. If that's
weird.
I can't get Josh excited about them yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I have like $6,000 Canadian e-bike in my garage right now to test, so I'm kind of excited about that one.
Yeah, no, that one's good. No, I think one of the reasons for just better branding and getting our name out there is because while we might be, we need the brands to think of us as an influencer in the space and helping you find your new bike or your next bike. And I don't think we're currently there yet. I think we have strong connections with brands and the product managers that are making decisions about next year's lineup, because they're very interested in using this data to help them do that. But they're not necessarily, these companies are usually big enough to where they're not tightly connected to the marketing folks who are going to be deciding where the sample bikes go. So I think we're making progress there for sure.
Yeah.
But and it's been a couple months, right? So we're making really good progress there. But I'd say historically, they're not chomping at the bit to give us a bike to test right now. So,
and thankfully, like I've with the stuff that I already done, like have relationships with Polygon and Marin and RSD and Stanton, so we've been able to kind of like pull that in too. But now because it's been mostly like Canyon coming in from the 99 Spokes end, and then Marin and Polygon from my end. So we're kind of trying to do that balancing act of like, we don't want like every video to be either like a Polygon or a Canyon, but also they're like, oh, here, take a bike, try it out, tell us what you think, make a video. So kind of trying to balance that of making sure a huge priority for us is that we're unbiased and we're giving unbiased advice to people who are looking at different bikes. But if we're only partnering with one or two brands, that can get complicated. So hopefully that'll continue to expand and grow. And I think we're all confident that it will.
So is your idea to do a lot of reviews? Like you're going to go out and ride the bike and kind of give a review of it, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's going to be, that's a whole lot more helpful than like me sitting here and like walking you through what these geometry numbers mean. And like, okay, I've ridden this, drivetrain on a different bike and I can tell you about that. I think that's helpful for sure. And I think we'll definitely plan on continuing doing those, kind of top 5 type videos. Like we just did a top 5 endurance road bikes, where we kind of pick 5 different categories within that endurance road bike niche and select kind of a high performing, kind of a best bike for each of those categories. I think that's helpful. But I think being able to hear from someone who's actually gotten on the bike and, logged 100 miles on it and can say, hey, this is what this bike does well. this is what this bike doesn't do well. I know the geometry table looks like this, but to be honest, it still felt like this to me. I think that sort of information is useful to everybody, even people, maybe like the three of us who are pretty comfortable scanning through a part spec list and a geometry table. Because, lots of times a bike will have attributes that, go beyond that, or maybe don't.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm riding a Fazari right now that I, on paper, didn't think I was going to like at all.
Yeah.
And it really blew me away when I rode it. And I've definitely had more than that experience. I remember back when the SB5 from Yeti came out, I wanted one so bad. It just looked so sick. And like, I rented one and rode it, and I got off the bike that day and was like, I'm definitely not buying this bike.
I'm glad I didn't just buy it sight unseen.
Yeah. And like probably a week before that, I was like almost ready to drive to Oregon to get one because they didn't have any sales tax. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like, dude, that would have sucked to go, do a 16-hour round trip to go buy a bike in Portland and find out that I didn't like it. But no. So it's definitely there's definitely a market for that content. I mean, there's plenty of channels that have done very well on that. So I think that and it won't go away because everybody's always looking for something new. Like if you started a trail building channel 2 years ago during COVID, you'd be killing it at that time. But it seems like the trail build videos aren't as popular right now. Yeah. And but there's 100% people are still going to be looking up new bikes that are coming out to find out, if it fits for them. Are you doing all the editing and film work and starring in it all yourself right now?
Yep. One man show.
Yeah. That's a lot. There's a lot to do there. A lot of things going on there. So.
Yeah. Especially when the video he does is like, compare these 4 Shimano groups that are, drivetrains, and that video requires swapping all those parts.
100-hour video, 100-hour production time.
Good thing you're doing one a week and not trying to do more than that. Otherwise, you might work Josh out of his brain.
I think in a perfect world, we would have our choice between all the pre-embargo new release bikes that we could get our hand that we could fit into the schedule, right? I think when the bike launches, people want to get a high, or at least I do, I want to get a high level view of what's this new model about, how has this platform changed. And I think if we could have had our hands on the bike, even if it's briefly, just with a little video review, and here's the bikes on 9-inch spokes, and I can compare the geo and see how, the change. That was like another feature that is in the site that's very popular. That was one of our first features, is the geometry drawing. So we'll take the geometry, you can overlay them, and you can really understand, how does it compare to the bike that I know how it feels? Oh my gosh, that C2 angle is way steeper. That's something I should know, right? It can give you something more to hold on to when you're trying to understand what the geo changes are. But anyway, we'd love to have more new releases where we've actually physically touched the bikes. I can tell you.
I like the idea of that other tool that you were talking about, because you could easily see like, the bottom bracket's lower, or the reach is much longer, or things of that nature, and really kind of give you that.
Even from like a perspective of like a YouTuber. So I don't know if you guys are listening, because that's what I was saying. Before I worked for 99 Spokes, I would use that tool and use screen recordings and screenshots of it, because it's so helpful to be able to visualize that. Like if you're not spending a lot of time geeking out on that, to see like, that's what this difference in like seat tube angle does, and I can see how like it's going to be more compact when I'm sitting down and pedaling, and to be able to see how this bike will feel different than that bike. Like to me, that's it's one of the older tools on the website, but I still think it's one of the most insightful, especially when you're talking with someone who doesn't like have a firm grasp on geometry just yet, on bicycle geometry yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't, even that have been riding for a long time. A
lot of really talented riders. I just made a little short form video about that today. So many people like great on a bike, and they can ride any bike, which is awesome, but they couldn't really pinpoint the differences in what makes a bike feel good to them versus not good to them. And that's okay.
Yeah,
But I
no,
think, and that's why like the website is fantastic. It helps people navigate that process and be able to find that bike without riding 15 of them.
Yeah, and for you to be able to articulate that is also, it's something that's I just say like special, because honestly, I'm one of those people that, I mean, I have to really put myself through an extreme to notice the difference. So it's like some people are like, "Oh, do you like these brakes?" And I'm like, "Well, I have to ride these brakes for like 3 weeks and then get on my other bike with the different brakes on it, or switch them onto this brake, like, and then I'll know in like the first like 10 seconds, like, oh, okay, now that's what's different." But otherwise, if I was just to like, hey, one ride here and then swap and then go back and do another ride, there's no way. I'm just not going to do it. I just won't notice it. And I think some of it is like things that I just take for granted, or I because I've been riding for so long, I don't even think about, but and some of it your mind just fixes right away for you. So if you're not even trying. So like I went on a ride over the weekend and I was riding somebody's e-bike, and first corner, like 30 yards into the trail, I knew those brakes really sucked compared to mine. You know what I mean? Like because I yanked them and they weren't stopping me in the space that my brain was thinking they were going to. But 5 minutes from then, I had no problem. You know what I mean? It was like
I just had that experience, like literally brakes. It was with that same N7, which is a 170 millimeter enduro bike with dual piston brakes in the back. I don't know. I made that decision, but I like got on it and I was like, holy crap, these brakes are terrifying. But then I got used to them and I adjusted to them. And then I got back on my bike a couple days ago and like almost went over the bars, because I was just like, you like adjust and you have to go back and be like,
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, then being able to articulate that, that's a special talent. It's definitely one of the reasons that I shy away from doing that type of review on things, just because I don't notice it. I mean, it even comes down to like people that can explain a skill really well. Like I've watched a bunch of videos on like how to do a drop, and as I'm watching, I'm like, that is what I'm doing. But there is zero thought of me being like, oh yeah, I drop my heels like this and I push the handlebars like this and I do this with my weight right before, like none of that I think about, so it's I'm the worst bike coach when it comes. I'm like, okay, so just drop down and it'll be fast.
Do it, dude.
Yeah, just send it. So so that's awesome that you have that skill set.
I love teaching. I mean, I taught high school for 4 years, so I really enjoy like being able to take an abstract or complex idea and breaking it down. And it's sort of a like, I was it's a bunny trail. I won't go on it, but just I think it's cool to be able to combine those two things.
I was thinking the same thing when you told me your experience as a high school science teacher. That's what you said, right? Yeah. And the first thought that popped in my head is like, oh, well, he's teaching people on YouTube. It's the same thing. You know, like it. And so you've had a lot of experience on it then. And although your class isn't the size of the world like it is on YouTube, but you're still the same thing of being in front of people and having to like overcome the people that didn't understand what you were saying, or like they're teaching you at the same time of like, oh, you didn't explain that very well, so you need to redo this. So at this point you have a pretty refined skill set, so getting into the YouTube space, it makes sense why you're doing well. So Scott, I would imagine that most people are like, oh, so you compare bikes and it's just a couple of parts. Like, why would you possibly need like 4 or 5 developers to continue working on things?
Yeah, great question. Why? The data is a beast. We scrape hundreds of sites, and it's like, if you're into coding, it's like coding against the world's worst unsupported API. Like, because when the website changes, the scrapers break. We have custom code targeting every single site that we scrape, and there are machine learning or AI approaches to solving this problem, but you can't really get around the sometimes it lies problem. And so we found a more well, not yet at least. So we found a more manual, brute force approach to be more successful. So yeah, I mean, it does take 2 developer, or at least 1 developer full time, to just keep this thing up and keep the data current. And the only way we're really able to, justify that investment is because we have, partnerships in the bike industry that are paying directly for that data.
Mhm.
And then, we have an API that they use to access the data, and we have, not everyone has developers, so we have like an Excel spreadsheet that we can give them that's backed by an API, so they can refresh it and get, have access to the data whenever they need it.
So
and then
for
I
people
think,
that aren't in
Yeah.
tech, can you explain what an API is for people?
well, I'm gonna have Josh do that because I am also, no, I'm not, just kidding. No, I am also definitely, like, I used to manage developers or software developers at my last job, and that's like the biggest, strike against me is like, does not coach, like has no coaching capabilities. Like, so I'm definitely like, I don't know, you just do the thing, like, just,
Yeah.
just.
I was
Anyway.
speaking your language a minute ago. You were like,
Absolutely,
yeah,
I'm 100% with you. Yeah. So, oh, sorry, what was the question? What's an API?
what's an API? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So it's just a way for a computer to access the data. So, you're writing. Here's an example. We not only we partner directly with bike brands, we also partner with people building, like a cycle computer app, right? That you have the app and you want to find, your bike, to get it set up so it knows the wheel size and all that. And so you just start typing in, specialized, and it's like suggesting these, bike models for you as you type. What's happening behind the scenes there is it's talking to our API, our, application programmer interface or something like that. So it's a service that's running on another, computer in the cloud, and, you can query it for information. And so the API is used to support, refreshing the Excel sheet, or, dumping data into their business intelligence platform that they use, or just anyone that needs access to the data.
And then it's like a common like rule set of how things work, so that hey, this is an API. I can write my code to work this way with that API.
Yep.
As
Yeah,
compared to, I'm just trying to fill in the blanks too for a little bit. Like, as compared to, like, when you're scraping a site, it's not like your computer just goes to the website and just reads all the text. It's looking at the code, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, with the scraping the site, sometimes, I don't want to go there, it's bore people, but sometimes there are, API calls behind, that happen when the page loads, and sometimes we can directly access those, and those are great. But other times, all we really have is the text that's on the page and the markup that, lays it out. And so, we're doing things like, find, the button that has the text bikes in it, and then go up a level and then find the list of items beneath that. And then that's the specs, and, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It can be tedious. Thankfully, I don't have to do most of that anymore. We have a full-time developer in Ukraine who she handles most of this. I worked at a company for years and was able to find the very best, contract workers, and poached her quickly after we started 99 Spokes, and she's been working for us when she's not dealing with what's happening over there. But
yeah. So then, do you have some like, as far as like your web servers and stuff like that, are they hosted all over the place, or are you kind of just small enough that you can still just do one? You don't have to do like load balancing all over the place.
Yeah, we use Versal, so it's a cloud deployment environment, and it handles it. It's a nice abstraction on top of deploying a website. So there are many servers running our code all over the world, giving you quick access to it, and it is largely hidden from us, as far as we just click this deploy button. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but
Yeah.
it is far from the days of, you know, a physical server running in a basement that you have to go manage, or, you know,
Right.
you know, deployment's not a problem.
Yeah.
Um,
I definitely have a good understanding of what you're talking about. I think that, but it helps for other people that don't necessarily aren't in the IT space to kind of get an idea of like how complicated these things are, because I
I'm
think
learning
that
right
most
now.
yeah, I think most people that they go to a website and they just think that, you know, there's just a computer and it just does these things that, you know what I mean? It's very easy to simplify. So at least to the person that's on the end user side. So
yeah. And then I think the you know, in that vein, you know, one of the more powerful pieces of what we do is, you know, we understand all the parts on the bike, all, you know, the wheel size, the suspension travel, the price, the, you know, all that stuff. So we have a powerful search interface, so you can go and, you know, I think that's part of the magic of 99 Spokes. You can go in and, you know, say I'm looking for an e-mountain bike that's within this price range with this suspension travel, with that, you know, has 29-inch wheels, and, you know, whatever. You can curate a query like that using our filtering UI really easily. And that all that is happening because we have all of our data in Elasticsearch, which, if someone's into it, that's the technology we use for searching and the data.
Have you guys thought about like building, or do you have something for like building custom where you could actually piece your own bike together?
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot, and have for a long time. I think it's when you start taking community data and figuring out how to integrate that into your platform, I think it, you know, brings a lot of overhead, like in, you know, who gets to see it, and is it a dupe of a bike that already exists, or is this not even really a bike that anyone had access to, or, you know, managing the user submissions is not without its challenges. And so I think that's why we
I was
avoided
thinking
it.
almost in a way of like being able to like price it. So it'd be like, oh, I could buy the Santa Cruz Bronson frame and these carbon, you know, 1-up bars, and I could build this spec and then know generally like that's what it's going to cost me. Like, I might be able to find some better deals, but
there's
something like that, or
there's a PC parts picker, which is like what you're describing for building a computer. I think the problem there is that we don't have all the individual components priced out and available to select. I think that's yet, at least. So we would have to really understand, you know, I think there's a couple. It's an interesting, it's definitely, it's what we were thinking about earlier when we were going to be, you know, just replacement parts. Like, you really need to understand, you know, all the bikes, and then all the components, and then a compatibility graph for what goes with what. And we just don't have all the components part. You know, we do have some of the key components like forks and, you know, drivetrains and stuff like that, because that helps contribute a spec level score. But, you know, when you start getting into like one of the thousands of carbon bars that are out there, and, you know, it just gets a little, it's an overwhelming amount of data. But people are definitely tackling this problem still. There's a couple new projects out there, like they're going after the compatibility problem, but we'll see. I think one of the main, so geometry, some people are obsessed with geometry. A lot of the people that are obsessed with geometry often have these sort of fringe bikes they like they're into crust bikes, or they're, especially in like the road gravel space, you know, they have these custom brands. And I think, you know, there are sites like Geometry Geeks that allow you to, you know, submit bikes and their geometry, and those, you know, that's something, I think that's probably a way we'll sort of dip our toes into that, you know, without the bike parts problem, just more frame geometry.
I think you could probably hit most of the stuff with like the major parts that are being used. You know what I mean? I like, if I'm thinking about like mountain bikes, for example, if I was coming to build and you had, you know, 5 handlebars that were all the,
Yeah.
you know, like the Santa Cruz bars, the 1-Up bars, the P&W bars, you know, like,
Yeah.
I could think of probably, you know, 10 at the most. And if I had more options than that to choose from, it would be probably like too many. You know what I mean? And maybe then I could just like pick something that I knew was close to like price wise, and at least give me a good idea of kind of where I was at or whatnot.
Sure.
But so what kind of feature, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about things that you haven't released yet, but how are you prioritizing like what features to bring to the site?
Yeah, we have, like, I think our number one priority is kind of serving the data customers that we already have, and that sucks up quite a bit of time. I think we have plans to improve the comparison table. I mean, it's more than half of our traffic is on mobile, and it's not a very good experience on a phone if you have more than a couple bikes. And so I think, you know, and there's a bunch of things that's like one of the original things that we implemented, and it's pretty crusty, and there's a bunch of improvements we want to make to that thing. Beyond that, you know, I think we don't have a strong methodology for how we prioritize things. I think, you know, we have some ideas of some bigger areas, different areas that we'd like to go into. I mean, we've kicked around marketplace because that's, you know, selling your bike online we're a perfect platform to hang that data on. And we've kicked around going into different verticals. So, you know, doing the same thing for skis and snowboards, for example. There is still a long list of improvements that we'd like to make to the bike or to the site as it is today that probably don't seem like huge effort, but will take time. So I don't know. We have to get over the comparison table refactor, and then we'll see.
So you do have like actual reviews though from people that own the bikes as well on the site, correct?
Yeah, we did we call them rider notes. We have a few different types, so you can provide, like, tire clearance is big in the gravel space, you know, and, you know, brands measure tires differently, and manufacturers sometimes are a little conservative with what can actually fit. And so our thinking there is like, well, we just want to do these sort of like micro reviews. Like, here's a recipe of a, you know, I have a Specialized Diverge and I know I can fit this 38C tire on, and here's a picture of it, and, you know, just these kind of recipes. And so that's sort of where we're going with, you know, fit and tire clearance, and we even have just like a generic review type. Those are trickling in. It's, again, I think more community features like that is something we want to do in the future. I think if users can make corrections to the data, we head more towards like a wiki-ish thing with, you know, some guardrails. I think that could be pretty powerful. Just a more scalable solution for managing the data.
I think I'm just looking at it right now under sizing, for example. Like, there's a rider fit note there, and it says, you know, 6'1", size large, just right. And I think in my head, a lot of times I'll ask people, you know, what their inseam is too. Yeah. Because then it's like you actually get a better idea. Like, oh, are they like tall in the body, or are they tall in the legs? Like, where, you know, it's so much with bikes is so subjective though, where it's like you don't know when you read that, you know, is that actually some data that I should trust? You know, like I'm 6'2" and I ride a large because I like a smaller bike. You know what I mean? So if I'm not actually thinking about explaining that to somebody and they just ask me what size, I'm like, yeah, I ride a large. And they're like, oh, that's what I should be on. I'm like, well, most people would ride an extra large if they were my height, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think it's, you know, it's data that's more useful with more in aggregate and with more submissions, right? Like, I think you can filter out if you have enough people contributing it, you can filter out the outliers a little bit more effectively. But yeah, inseam is we wanted to make it really easy for people to add them. And I think a lot of people don't know they're inseam, or they might just give you their pants, the jeans they're wearing or whatever.
Yeah.
But it could be optional. It's good.
Yeah.
It could be helpful.
Yeah. Or it could be like the other, I don't know. I'm just like, my brain just starts thinking, what would I do? And it's like, if I'm looking at this bike, can you get a ride wrap for it, or something like that, those kind of just like little features. But so what's
we do have an integration with ride wrap. I don't know if you go to a bike page, you'll see in the upgrades, you'll see if it has a tailored kit.
Cool.
We know their data. We match their tailored kits to our bikes, and then we can send you straight there if we have one.
Yeah. Well, that's rad then. I mean, so obviously you're thinking on the same wavelength that I am.
Yeah.
You're like, this is my job, man.
No, the ride wrap one is great. I think it's a good, like, very custom, very like specific to the bike thing to help people find.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well that I don't know if it would completely sway me on one bike or another, but it's definitely something that I would consider if I was like in between two bikes and then one of them didn't have a full kit, and it'd be like, because I used to be one of those guys that was like, whatever, dude, it's a mountain bike, and you just like, it's gonna get scratched up and beat up, but I think that was whenever I was a guy that would ride a bike until like it fell apart. And now I'm a guy that's like, 2 seasons, I'm like, I gotta get rid of it before it isn't worth anything anymore. And your paint looking decent nowadays is like, it's definitely going to help you a lot more in that aspect. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I put 3 kits on now, and I don't know that I'm getting any faster, but I do like them.
Yeah. I have not put one on yet. I pay my buddy that's a painter.
Oh, nice. I hope you pay him well. It's involved.
It is definitely one of those things where I know my own skill set, and that falls outside of it. It's like, it's too tedious for me, where I'm just like, well, the more beer I drink, the worse I'm going to get at this, and the more likely that I get to crumbling it all up in a ball and starting over, which is like another $150 or whatever.
Well, their instructions actually warn you not to drink too much beer, which I thought was pretty funny.
Well, good thing I don't read instructions.
Yeah, there you go. The person that, I got it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. The other like painful thing about ride wrap is that it's better to do it right when you first get the bike. But if your bike arrives before your kit does, then you want to ride it, and you don't want to wait for the big sticker. So
yeah,
that
was one of the hard things for me whenever I got this last frame, was like, okay, wait for the ride wrap to come, because it just, obviously, that's Murphy's Law, right? It didn't come before the bike, and then wait for, do not go ride it, and it's like, oh, I want to build it so bad, but my buddy can't put this thing on, So yeah, it's definitely best to wait. So but at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? So Josh, do you just is your main focus just reviews? That's like 100% where you're thinking, or do you think that there's some other kind of story aspects that you can tell that would also help with the kind of driving people to the site?
I think largely reviews. Reviews and like maybe the occasional tutorial, but those would again be focused like around buying new bikes. That's what 99 Spoke is all about. We're not necessarily trying to teach people how to go out there and like corner better, or even necessarily how to work on their bikes. The purpose of the website is to inform buyers about the vast variety of bikes that are available to them. So that's kind of like the litmus test, I guess I would say, that like when we're talking about video ideas, that we try to put it past. Brian alluded to like the drivetrain video we did. We partnered with Jensen for that. We compared Dior all the way up through XTR and did like a side-by-side comparison of them, kind of through the framework of, if you're on the market for a new bike and you're looking at, okay, like, do I want to fork out the extra to go from SLX to XT? Is it worth it? And we're kind of trying to like frame everything around that, like buying a new bike sort of a lens. So we're not necessarily going to go out and compare like, which like aftermarket handlebars are the best or something like that, because it doesn't really speak to what we're trying to accomplish as a brand. That said, I think the story stuff is super critical. I don't know. Are you familiar with the YouTuber Fort9? He does motorcycle stuff.
Yeah. 100%.
Man, I just found him like a week or two ago. I'm not super into motorcycles, but like the way that guy like weaves the story through a product review. I like started watching his stuff. I don't, again, mild interest in motorcycles, but like an hour later, I was like, just watched like 6 of this guy's videos. Like I want to.
Yeah.
So I hope to be able to improve on that just in my own like kind of storytelling ability and to be able to do that with a review or a product comparison. So mostly reviews, but even like next week, we're going to do a video on like e-bike terminology, right? So educational, but in the context of helping inform you with purchasing a bike.
Yeah. No, that would be very helpful content, I'm sure. I think there's probably some space to tell some other kind of stories, like, these are what if you're looking to buy and you go to a event like Sea Otter or, whatever, the outer bike or something of that nature, like these are what you can expect, or like, this is how to make the best out of your time or something like that. But
we talked about that early on, because I'm big into that. I go to Sea Otter every year. I just actually didn't end up going, but I was planning on going to the I think they called it trying to remember if it was Built or the Handmade Bicycle Show that was out in Portland about a month or two ago. So we kind of talked about doing that, of like doing the trade show thing. And at this point, kind of Brian and Scott would kind of be like, no, we want to focus, kind of hone in on just like what matches our website right now. And I think with me, you mentioned earlier, like I'm writing scripts, I'm filming them, I'm editing them, as well as managing all 4 or 5 of our social media platforms. That's it's a lot. So it's spread a little thin, which prevents like being able to go super deep down like the creative rabbit hole. But in an ideal world, we'd have someone else manage social media and I could just do videos or something like that. But right now it's kind of like 13 hats switching between.
As expected, as things grow, things will change. I would imagine you guys are still going to monetize the site, so the site would eventually be able to probably help pay for more help on the video production side, I would imagine. Are you thinking like as far as monetizing the YouTube channel? Yeah,
totally. And I think a big thing, like I have my blind spots as a reviewer for sure. I'm a mountain biker and a BMX rider. So Scott, if you were to do a BMX review, let's do it. But so like getting on a road bike, like that's I'm doing my best to learn as much as I can. And even before I started doing, like I did a review of the Endurace, I rented a couple of bikes locally so I could have more of a base to compare them from. But we've already started shooting around the idea of like, finding someone who already has some experience in the video world, like basically finding a small YouTuber who's doing some road bike stuff and being like, hey, want to do like one video a month for us on our channel and we can get you a bike that you can spend some time on. And I think that'd be a cool way to expand. But
I was going to ask you that question as we were chatting. I was thinking, how do you become an expert in all these different, like I ride a gravel bike, but I am definitely not a gravel biker. You know what I mean? Like same thing goes with road, or, I have ridden enough that I have some small opinions, but they're definitely not like, if I was talking to somebody that was a full on road biker, like they would be very apparent to them real quick that I'm not a road biker. You know what I mean? So if I was reviewing it, they'd be like, yeah, this guy is like, he's a joke, so so it sounds like then probably your content is leaning more towards like the mountain bike side at this point.
I would say that we are doing our best to avoid doing that too much, we want to be well-rounded in all verses of cycling. So even like commuter bikes, so everywhere from a $300 3-speed commuter to a $12,000 mountain bike. And I have these areas that are much more comfortable for me. So like did a review on the new 29-inch Marin San Quentin. Well, I've ridden every single Marin San Quentin that they've made since they introduced that bike. So really easy for me to talk about it and dive really deep into the nuances between how this 29-inch model is different than the 27.5-inch model that they launched in January. But when I'm talking about the Endurace, obviously my review is going to be a little bit more surface level, and do my best to get on a lot of bikes and ride as many as I can. But
well, it sounds like you have a bunch of riders there that are the other people within 99 Spokes. Is that
yes?
Because Scott, you were saying you guys were riders when you first started.
Yeah, we haven't gotten in front of the camera yet, but it is technically possible.
Well, I mean, I wasn't even thinking in that aspect. At least the aspect of that he could like knowledge fish from you guys, or
for sure,
have you guys be able to, hey, watch this video from your aspect, and like, does this make sense, or where could you help me out? Because I know, like, creatively, that's a challenge for me. Is like, fortunately, I have another group of creators that I'm friends with that I can bounce things off of, but sometimes it's like you get stuck in your own edit, and it's really hard to see where, like, hey, that drags, or that's, doesn't make sense. So having the other people that are in part of 99 Spokes, I'm sure that helps a lot.
Yeah, I think the team as a whole, we have a good breadth of knowledge on all the areas that we want to cover. But I do think I agree with Josh that, getting taking a little bit off of his plate and getting some fresh faces, up on the videos, I think will be a good thing as we grow.
Yeah. Maybe that's somehow that you like have some kind of like ambassador type of thing or something like that, where you can pick and choose from people, and because you have, good relationships with certain brands, you'd be able to like pass on some kind of pricing for them or something like that, where it's not necessarily where you need them to be employed, or maybe they're just going to give you some video of them talking about it, and then you can put it into an edit. You know what I mean? Where like they don't actually have to make the whole video. It's like, hey, just talk to me about this, or talk to me about that. Here's the questions that I want you to answer. Give me a shot from this angle and this angle, and boom, you're good. So, but I mean, as it is right now, you guys are just getting started. I would imagine with just the main brands of bikes, not even getting into the direct to consumer brands, just like the ones that are in the bike shops, just to keep up with what they're releasing throughout the year and trying to like make review content on that. That's a lot. So it's like there has to be some way that you're deciding, how do you to me, that's like when I'm sitting there thinking about how to solve that problem, that's the thing that seems the most difficult to me, is like, how do I juggle between the specialized gravel bike and also the commuter bike that you were talking, the cruiser that somebody wants to just go pick up their groceries with, versus the $1,000 Chinese e-bike, like what videos, like how do you prioritize like what you're doing?
I think just trying to keep a balance, so we haven't even talked about like short form content right now, but most of our growth on every channel has been from short form videos. I mean, we've got several videos with hundreds of thousands of views. We've got one that's close to 500,000. And so those are big ways that people are like finding out about us and interacting with us on social media. And so those are obviously a little bit easier to pump out, but it is like looking like, okay, we've got like 2 mountain bikes, a road bike. Let's try to get an urban bike in there. Okay, now we need a gravel bike. And so like, especially this time of year, like fall, winter, so many new bikes coming out. So it is looking like, okay, we've got like a couple days ago, I think there's a new Canyon Lux Trail, the new Santa Cruz V10, and the Giant Stance, like all dropped the same day. It's like, okay, what are we going to focus on? I'm not going to make like 3 shorts today or whatever, but how are we going to focus on it and like look back and see what brands we've talked about recently, what categories of bikes we've talked about recently, and just trying to keep it as well-rounded as we can. But again, I think like we're all just trying to keep in mind that, we're not Bike Radar. And I think the people who are engaging with us on social media recognize that. And we're doing our best to like step up from where we've been, for even just 4 months ago, but can't get everything.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately that short form comment or content has become more prevalent now, so that you actually could, touch base at least lightly on some of those releases pretty quickly. I mean, as well as I do, like, yes, the short form video still takes quite a bit of effort to make, but it's definitely not the same effort as like a 15-minute video, you know? So that's nice. I mean, just not having to create a thumbnail in the same aspect that you do for YouTube is like, oh wow, so much time that I've saved. Or like, yeah, or it's like, oh, I really only need to find one piece of music. I don't need, you know, 10. And which, you know, like that stuff is just so time consuming. It's one of those things where if you don't make content, you really don't realize how long that stuff takes, you know?
Yeah.
So, Scott, what's some of the struggles that you guys are like run into as trying to, you know, make this thing bigger and better?
Model years.
Yeah.
Part of, you know, organizing the data like we want to requires model years. And as I'm sure you're aware, the bike industry is moving away from them. You know, I think
for the better.
I think mainly because they want to be able to sell the same bike, you know, year over, you know, for a couple of years in a row without, you know, devaluing it. You know, it's a 2022 or whatever. But if you're looking forward 5 years and you're trying to help someone find their bike, you know, so they can replace the brake pads or something, they're going to be thinking in terms of years and, you know, not generations of the frame or whatever they've moved to. So I think that's a challenging, you know, boring problem for us, you know, because we have to sort of, some brands will declare it and then we'll use it. Some brands kind of like have it in the page, but it's hidden and we'll use that. And then other brands, we have to just sort of decide when it's,
that just gets difficult. That gets difficult too, though. I'm just thinking like in terms of Santa Cruz, for example, they usually release every 2 years, let's just say. And so it's like, okay, you have the Bronson 4, right? But both years are different. Like, even though they're both the Bronson 4, it's not like they have the exact same drivetrain on. Like, let's just say the transmission dropped this year, so that gets the transmission this year for their top end. So even if you're thinking in terms of model, you're still going to have like Model 4 A and B.
Yeah, it is difficult.
That is a hell of a problem.
And it's not even really a problem that can be solved correctly, right? It's like there's some amount of subjectivity in like making the call. Someone has to make the call, right? And so we do that. You know, Santa Cruz right now they have multiple, like they have say 4 colors for the Nomad or some, and 2 of them are the 2024 and 2 of them are the 2023. And that is actually in, if you look hard enough, it's in the page data. You know, so internally they're talking about it like that. You know, and the 2023s are on sale and the 2024s aren't, but it's the same product page you're looking at. Just changing the color selector, you know, modifies the price.
Yeah, I've noticed some things like that with them, particularly like if you're looking at the URL, the way that the like image is named or something like that. And like, oh, okay, so this is like I've gotten a clue before, like, oh, there's something new coming because this has, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, there's this letter there that's not on the other ones or something. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, we added a new releases feature, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And so, you know, we have a page on the site that is new releases. And so we basically take the press release from the brand and, you know, paste it into the new release and add an image and a YouTube video if they have one, but then have a comparison of the bikes that are on the site. So you can quickly get in, you can read a little bit of their marketing copy and quickly get into comparing the bikes on 99 Spokes. And that's been super helpful for managing, you know, while it's a manual task, it helps us kind of keep a better overview of when things are changing, because, you know, when Canyon releases a new Lux trail, you know, they talk about it, and then we know that we need to go tell the robots that this is actually a 2024, not a 2023, even though there's nothing in the page to indicate that. So there's some, when you're saying, what are you guys all doing? That's what we're doing. We're managing model years.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like I said, as the end user, they're all things that you wouldn't think of, and I think that in terms of this conversation, I think that stuff's interesting. It's interesting to understand like what's really happening there. So you guys have a sizing on the bikes, and I think that's one of those things that's so difficult for everybody, even if you've been riding for a while. Is that purely off of what the manufacturer is recommending, or is that some other kind of information that you're using to put that chart together?
Yeah, if the manufacturer has a size chart on the bike page, we will include that data and use it to populate the size chart. If they don't, we will have an estimated. We have a little asterisk next to it. It says estimated, and that's based on looking at, of all the data we have, if it's a size large, it typically fits within this range. And so we'll just kind of give you a reasonable default. It's not a perfect solution, I think, but the size charts that the manufacturers provide also is not a perfect solution. I mean, those are often just not, I mean, even with a fairly middle of the road, preference, I feel like some of those size charts are off.
Yeah, I was on somebody's site not too long ago. I don't remember what brand it was, but I thought it was really cool that it showed like your height, let's just say 6'2", and it'd be like extra large, and it'd be, this is more stable, and then it would be large. This will be more whippy and fun. I thought it was really cool that they broke it down like that, where then it kind of gave somebody like an idea of, oh, well, that's kind of what I would rather feel, or the cockpit is going to feel tight like this, but it'll climb good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I know Specialized does that with like their S sizing or whatever, but going back to what you were saying earlier, Robert, it's so subjective. There's the word I'm going for. So subjective, of like this. We've got a Canyon Torque on to review, and I think the size large has a 500 mil reach, which is like equivalent to an XL in a lot of brands, and it's just so much variance. It's crazy.
Do you guys think that sizing should change to something like what Specialized does, where they have all these different numbers, or do you think the sizing should go maybe like the route like road bikes, where it's really like a 52, a 56, a 58? Like, would that help more in the mountain bike space to be kind of a little bit more generic that way?
Didn't we start there? All right, 18.5.
I don't know. Like in my mind, when I started riding in the 90s in mountain bikes, and it was still like large. No, I guess there was like 19-inch.
Yeah, that's what I remember when I started in like 2012.
Right.
It was like an 18-inch or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's right. I forgot about that.
Huh. Well, and I think they were measuring. They were measuring the center of the bottom bracket, like center to top, like traditional, and that doesn't really work anymore. Like that, a lot has changed there. I don't know that the names are the problem. I think it's just a complicated problem to solve. Like, have you seen the rad guy, the rad body measure, or I can't remember his name right now, but it's like a YouTuber, and he talks about his rad system, and it's like if you think of stack and reach, it's like the hypotenuse of the triangle. It's like
it's like you're down 2 blanks pretty much.
Well, but it's basically like you take a string and you go from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the handlebar, like where you're going to grip it. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about sizing a bike, because it removes like seat tube angle, and as long as you assume like a relative, and it accommodates for the stem length, and it just this single measure, and like you basically want that to match where your fist is when you're standing next to a wall. So
I think you're talking about the Lee Bike Spikes guy.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
And he
has a lot of really good information on his channel.
I think that's an interesting approach towards sizing for mountain bikes, at least. I think, and he has some interesting ideas of why that's the right size, and how you can move the bike around underneath you, and what happens when you try and do that on a bike that's too big. And he dismisses the whole idea of longer is more stable because modern mountain bikes are all stable, even if they're, I don't know. It's polarizing, but I think that's kind of an intriguing, easy to measure, easy to map to a human way of sizing that all the other measures don't really, they have their shortcomings.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, it really is like you said, a tough problem to solve when you come down to it, because A, it's so subjective, and B, it's like there's so much at play that where it's like, oh, okay, well, that large bike might be perfect for you if you change the stem from the 35 millimeter that they have on there to a 50. You know what I mean? Yeah, but that's going to change your steering. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So it's such a mess. And I think a site like what you guys are building that's, trying to educate people on what those things are is it's definitely needed. It's one of those things where a lot of people don't realize, like, hey, if I change this stem to a longer one, like, what is that going to do to the way my bike feels when I'm riding it? Or if I'm sizing down, like I know I'm riding a large, and more than likely my seat is going to be way taller than they ever expected it to be. So more than likely when I'm climbing, I'm going to my front tire is going to feel not as planted, because a lot of times it's going to be very easy for me to pull the weight back. But that's something that I'm willing to accept for the flickability of the bike whenever I'm smashing. But somebody that's just starting, they have no clue. They're like, well, I really like the black one, and that's a large, and the extra large only comes in brown. I don't want the brown one. So that's what they're really deciding on. So,
I mean, I think for the person that doesn't have a lot to go off of, it's pretty easy to hit the mark and get them a bike that they're going to have fun on. But I think, that when you make that decision, you almost always offend the people that know everything about bikes, and because they can find a reason why that isn't the right, based on their opinions. And I think that, for someone like you, the geometry, if you can look at the geometry of a bike that you like, and how it handles, and then overlay the bike you're considering on top of it, that's we can't tell you which size you should ride, because you know what you want. But if you can see and visualize, the seat tube angle or the, whatever difference is in the bike you're considering, I think that's helpful for you as a type of user.
Yeah, I didn't realize you guys had that tool actually. Once we get off and go take a look at it, because it sounds pretty cool to check out.
I was coming from an enduro, a specialized enduro, want to get an e-mountain bike, and then I was looking at the Heckler SL, and I'm in between sizes there, and the sizing chart even has me in between sizes, but I can just absolutely see it when I draw the bikes on top of each other. I look at the geo overlay, and I ended up making the decision based on that to then get a relay instead, because that was just exactly what I wanted it to be.
You're that doesn't work.
Which is a bummer, because I was really stoked on that Heckler SL, but my Brian, the other 90 Spokes guy, ended up with that, and it's very cool. But I do also feel like I made the right call based on my.
And then they released a new Kenevo right after you bought it.
I felt bad living in Bellingham and not having a transition, so I had to
There you go. What's the Scott? Where's the perfect spot that you see the site getting to? Where is is there a certain set of features where you're like, okay, in my mind, once we get there, we're pretty set? And
I mean, I think we currently, or we've built a tool that's really attractive and helpful for the people that might be so inclined to make their own spreadsheet, and and crunch the numbers or get way too into comparing these bikes. And I think we haven't necessarily served or at least our UX hasn't necessarily served just the absolute beginner. And I don't know that we'll ever get there, but I think we can move away from the power user and towards, serving the more novice. I don't really know the difference between, a super deluxe select and select plus and base, and what does it mean to have these knobs? And I mean, there's all these like problems that you take for granted being in this space for so long. You understand what these things mean, and I think there's just a lack of accessible education around them for someone who's just getting into it. And I think
like
where would I like to go?
Like a 4-star fork, and this fork is a 2-star fork kind of idea is what you're thinking?
Yeah, like I don't want to make it can't be that simple. I mean, we kind of already do that with the spec level. Like we give this one more points because it's more expensive because it has more dials. But I want to like help people understand what that means. Like, why would I want that? And so I think, and it becoming a better educational resource for people that aren't necessarily like way into it, like they don't know everything already. I think is just a general direction we're trying to go. And I think the stuff Josh is doing is part of that. But I think the site can also get better at it. And I think, ultimately we love what we're doing right now. We think it's valuable to people and we're excited about, building it and maintaining it. And so I think I just want it to continue to grow and become more of a known influencer in the space, which will open up more opportunities to make it even better, and just keep doing that. I think my view of, the cycling industry and marketing is that everybody does Google and Facebook, and then they do like the top 3, 4, 5, media outlets related to bikes, and they ignore almost everything else. And so I think it would be great if we could break into one of those top 3, 4, 5. We're not the same. We're not trying to be the same. We're not trying to be a Pink Bike, a Vital, but we have like this different angle, and we're, sort of regarded as an important, like if you're going to release your bike, you want to be here. You want to be talked about here. And it doesn't even necessarily mean like they're paying us, right? Like it just means we want to be in the loop so we can help provide the data, so we can help the people on site.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, if you're providing good information or good content, you'll become that no matter what, and like
which end of the day will that happen?
Right. Exactly.
How many days?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing in the YouTube space where, with other creators that, you'll beat yourself up over, why is my channel not growing, or why is this video not doing well? And it's like, well, more than likely it's not doing well because it's not a good video.
Yeah.
Like you have, it's really, but when you make good stuff, people eat it up, and I think that's the bottom line, is like provide information that people want, and they'll come for it, and it seems like what you guys are doing is doing that. So I could see it catching on, and I think that the aspect of adding in the social media stuff to kind of build a brand that people recognize that way. I mean, how many people have bought Park Tools because of their tutorials that they have on there? You know what I mean? There's a ton of people that they could walk into the store, and other than it being blue, they would have never noticed that it was any different than any other tool that was hanging on the wall. But it's like, there's so many tutorials out there. It's brand recognition, and I think you guys are onto that. So I want to ask real quick before we wrap up, why 99 spokes?
There's not I don't have a great answer for you.
Yeah.
Try and find a domain.
Yeah. That was
yeah. I mean, it was, it's I think it's memorable. It's, it's easy to spell. It was available.
Yeah.
I have friends that are like, what do you like? What, like, it's not, no wheel has 99 spokes, 32, 28, even like 64, like, I'm like, you're overthinking it. It's just 99 spokes. It's a lot of spokes.
No, I think it's cool.
55 stands.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, there you go. That's going to be the sister company. 55 stands. All right, man. Well, either way, I really appreciate both of you guys taking the time to sit down and chat with me. You feel like there's anything we didn't cover that you want to bring up before we get off?
No, I think it was
All
it.
right.
But also, thank you. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to come on. It's been great.
Yeah, 100%. So any of you out there that haven't checked out their content, look up 99 Spokes on YouTube or Facebook. They even have an Instagram, a TikTok. They got the Twitter or X. Now, I think that's what we got to do for the, like, how long do we have to say Twitter and X now that they changed their name? So, anyways,
I'm okay with them both going away. Just none of that.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, yeah, exactly. We're going to start a whole other conversation on that. So, if you want to check out the site, though, or any of the features that we talked about, 99, and that's not spelled out, it's the number 9, spokes.com, and go check out some of the stuff that they have over there. And while you're on Instagram and Facebook, giving them a follow, do me the favor and do the same thing for me. Because, you know, when I see those numbers grow, it makes me feel better about what I'm doing. If you want to do something for free, just remember, it only takes a bike to be a biker. Get out and be one.